even see it as a characteristic of a relationship. It was an event in somebody's life.
Well, I learned to apply what I already knew about gender and oppression and social justice to what I was doing in the group. I started reading and got some models, and I finally figured out that this is not just something that goes on with these men. This is something that goes on in the world, and I'm a part of it.
And men are saying the same things about their wives. You gotta meet her. You gotta meet her. You put her, you marry her. You live with my wife for 2 years and you'll be beating her too. All these little things that guys say, why are they the same everywhere you go? If there's not some kind of universal, if it's not linked to a whole thing about men in our society, in Western society.
And coming from a male privileged world, we're finding that there's a lack of resources for men to become healthy. And in terms of what we consider a healthy lifestyle is away from the violence, away from the power and control that we have, and to find the equal balance between your partner and yourself.
But what I discovered pretty quickly is that there was more to it than that. That I always think of the patriarchy's kind of smog that we all live in and agree that we're all affected by it like any isms, but that it exacerbates things as opposed to causing everything.
We tried more traditional approaches for batters. We had a 12-week program that focused on power and control and other issues. And we realized it wasn't very successful for a large majority of the perpetrators we were seeing.
Well, I think that the program has certainly gotten longer. I think their manualized approaches are good, but I've never been frankly impressed with it. So I'm still an old group worker. I still think that there ought to be a time in a group for learning stuff, and in a good group, learning a few new ideas. But I think a good group also has a time where we talk about things person to person.
And I think until we as the people who are working with men feel comfortable ourselves in letting go of our control over that process and really talking to men about their lives, which I think race and class and gender and those things get in the way of those dialogues, we're going to get stuck where I think we've been stuck for a long time of really recreating what he already knows how to do, which is to dominate. And you see a lot of domination that goes on in men's groups. And other times you'll go and you'll see people who really know how to sit down and talk to a man and have an incredible dialogue with him.
And then, those assumptions, go out the window for the most part. I mean, one of the things that we have learned is just how diverse the population matters is. So
in a sense, moving from a one-dimensional perspective to a multi-dimensional perspective.
Telling them what needs to happen, we started listening more to find out what their needs were.
to try and match intervention strategies to whatever those dynamics happen to be.
Depending upon their particular needs. And, do they tend to be, these very obsessed guys that can't let go of their partners? If they're clearly there, you might do certain things with those men to help them disengage more and to build sort of ways for them to take responsibility for themselves.
To realize that solutions for them probably need to be more tailored for each one of them.
And so what do those contextual issues, what role do those things lay in? What is that we actually dealing with? And how do I acknowledge their life situation, but also acknowledge how they are recreating their life situation because of their use of violence?
So that's the stuff that you, Lester, and other people in this movement have talked about. Getting these guys out of the room and onto the street, into the community, doing social justice kinds of things as part of their restoration to the community.
T is in this maturing that we're going beyond batter intervention as a group treatment modality to thinking much more broadly about how do we intervene with men in general and create an anti-violence movement and
A new and it might not be a new model for thinking about accountability, but accountability that is more than don't hit. I did hit and don't hit, but more extensive. And I feel as if it's a blending of the power and control issues, the judicial system that's the primary response, and the social movement. We need to kind of construct that will be the true, I think, garden for this work.
My assumption about batterers is that they assaulted their wives or their girlfriends because the women resisted what they thought was unjust authority.
we had basically assumed, like everyone else's, domestic violence was a psychosocial issue. It dealt with patriarchy and oppression of women by men.
Early was the philosophy that it was the patriarchy.
The issue of men assaulting women in any shape or form, assault, it was about being hurt.
The similarity I saw not as violence against women, but as male violence. It was still male violence coming out of the masculinity, socialization.
And to think more critically about the social context in which all this has occurred for hundreds of years, I think I, along with others, began to appreciate that this is really about the power and control of one individual over another individual. And in our culture, it is supported and accommodated when men do it to women.
And that, in fact, most violence that was inflicted on women was not inflicted out of uncontrollable urges or communication problems or unemployment or any of the other drug and alcohol, any of the other reasons that were offered. I thought the domestic violence was about controlling women.
I think I thought down the line that they couldn't change, but I did believe that they were sort of monsters. To me, what hasn't changed is that my notion that the way to change that is for them to figure out where it came from.
Like most folks, my assumptions I think were pretty common in that I could pick up who would be a batterer. I don't think it was. I think basically I thought I could tell who was a batterer, but also I wondered, the thing that I kind of remember most was my own anxiety around whether or not I would be able to develop empathy for these men and be able to connect to these men. Initial thinking coming from a victim place was, get him, stop that guy,
My assumptions when I first came in that these guys would be mostly working class with, big muscle guys with tattoos on their bodies.
And just had this sense that these were sort of violent people that were doing bad things.
They were the bad guys, and we were the good guys. And we wanted to make sure there was a big difference. People knew, but we knew.
I think that my understanding, along with many others in the beginning, was that we were dealing with an individual issue here. We were dealing with an anger issue, stress issue on the part of the individual perpetrators.
I thought of it as coming from people who were poorly educated. It had to do with being poorly socialized.
And had some kind of psychopathology. They'd had mad rearing. I think I was just applying a set of mental health assumptions to these men because that's what I knew.
Another assumption was that the problem was the individual men. That was pervasive. If we could just individually change a lot of men, then we could stop the violence. And the violence that we saw, the physical assault, the sexual assault, those kinds of things was the extent of the violence, that it was at that interpersonal level.
I think we all began to learn pretty quickly that that's not what was going on, and not nearly comprehensive enough in understanding why men batter women.
Not understanding
the way in which working with Mederos was working on behalf of women.
We were looking at all of these myriad kind of causal factors for why men batter, and we were losing the context. We were losing what of a fundamental reason why men batter. And I remember Barbara Hart saying something like, men batter because they want what they want when they want it.
I was very pro-feminist, so I sort of had a set of assumptions about gender, but for some reason, I don't know how to explain this, I didn't exactly connect it up with these batterers.
Ellen and I had developed a curriculum, and we were very proud of it. We spent 2 years on it. We were concerned that the old anger management style approaches and what we had in Duluth at that time was Batterers Anonymous. We were concerned that really wasn't getting at the heart of why men batter.
When you see it as a social justice issue, then the programs that we had already been putting into place, working with individual people as if they have an individual problem, needed to be let go.
I think we have jumped the gun. I think too many states are saying this is the way you have to do it, when in fact we don't know what the right way to do it is.
Strict notion of patriarchy, power control psychosocially was important, but it wasn't the only factor.
That I got involved in, and many people have a kind of a hissing contest about whose little group method is best, and not with the interest of battered women and their children at mind, but out of egos, out of like competitiveness that I think is very male, and I want to say that I'm part of it.
And I was hearing this from other people, like, don't get into this. You know, remember going back to the age we used to do a lot of heavy confrontation. Don't get into this heavy confrontation because you are, in a sense, reproducing the dynamics of dominant struggles with men.
I think there's a need for flexibility. I think there's a need not to ram one particular way of doing things down people's throats.
Fixed ideology wasn't going to be helpful in actually changing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors.
To view is that we have to kind of discontinue this practice of having a concept about men's lives and having, it's not that you don't have any theories or thoughts about what's going on when a man is beating his wife or his girlfriend or his partner, but these ways that we talk with men, you sit in groups and the facilitators have this idea, and then they start talking with the man. They drag him into their ultimately where they want to take.
Like the whole seasoned we are in this work, that we don't know everything about this work. And we're always learning.
My response to what will make a difference with men, I think has changed. Has gotten maybe more nuanced, more complex, less singular.
And I think we lost focus of what normalcy really is about. And I think that's what we need to start looking at.
My assumptions have changed. Then I think I've added more and more complexity to each of the men that I've worked with over the years. And I've added more complexity to the analysis Well, I was a city council member in Duluth, Minnesota in 1980. Then I'm a political activist prior to that in a number of different areas.
In the next legislative session, we had two men running for governor, and Rudy Perpich and a Christian conservative Republican named Al Quee. And we got the women that worked for both of their offices to give us their campaign schedules for the last 3 months of both of their campaigns. And we had some woman at every single talk they gave for 3 months just stand up in the audience and say, if you were elected governor, what are you going to do for women who are being battered?
Activity with the feminist women's movement led me to to consciousness raising, led me to a grassroots women's center. The
anti-war movement, like a lot of people, I began to engage in a variety of activities related to domestic violence, sexual assault, and even stalking at that point.
There were wanted to work in that area, and I'd gotten involved in the women's movement, so I was really excited about doing something about social change. But I was in
My interest in conflict in kids who are in conflict, and I could see in these men many of the children that were in my groups with the conflict groups for the children. I could see these guys just down the road further.
For me, I was meeting with a group of men in the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 70s to talk about our lives and relationships, what worked, what didn't work. And we were realizing that a lot of what didn't work had to do with being men, how we were raised to be men.
A group formed out of that conference called the St. Louis Men's Projects. And that led to many different things. It was a very poetic, very artful experience about finding the hearts of men together, different from the traditional masculinity, one that was more human, more whole, more complete.
Was the wanting to be a part of the community of men who shared the values that I had and felt like I could hang out with these guys. So it wasn't.
Fascinated by what makes men tick and what makes me tick.
Said that, well, I guess I do sex therapy, marital therapy, that kind. And so they sent me pretty much every marital case that came into this little clinic. And so I began to see all these cases where the women were talking about getting beaten up.
And we converted the sexual assault center into a full crisis center in East Texas. And it ended up working with bad women, children, and rape. We found there was a large overlap in sexual assault and incest victimization and battering. And that's what started.